All right, so welcome back to Checkpoint. Our number today focuses on something completely different from politics in this country. So I want you to take a look at this number. 16% is the VAT, but this is why it's important, because this is a number, a figure that is levied on books. We've aired this story before. Dorcas Wangira did this, speaking to publishers, booksellers, and also consumers of books as well. Publishers in Kenya have been pleading with the government to remove this VAT from books that was actually put there in 2013 through the VAT Act of that year. Now, why is this an important number for you to think about? Because it has some serious effects. So I want us to take a look at what effect it has on education in this country. So this is another number that will relate to the 16% VAT, and I'll tell you why. So 200 shillings is allocated by the government per child per year for textbooks. On this, 16% VAT is applied. Also, that is not the only figure. There's this one here of 100 shillings for teachers' guides and reference materials. Again, this is a figure that is subject to 16% VAT. And I'm going to tell you the knock-on effect that this has on books in the country, on education, on learning. Remember, Uwezo has constantly talked about children that are unable to read. There's the issue of access to books. So let me paint this picture for you with some more numbers that will tell you just how big an effect that 16% VAT has, all right? So let's start off with this one. Now, we do know that we've got 10.5 million children in primary school and about 2.4 million in secondary schools as well. So if we were to say that 200 shillings is what is the government per capita allocation for textbooks, so that's 200 shillings per child times 10.5 million children in primary school alone, that total figure that the government is spending on textbooks alone comes to 2.1 billion. Big figure, yes? Now, think that that 2.1 billion shillings is subjected to a 16% VAT tax. If you calculate the VAT on this 2.1 billion shillings that is allocated for all the primary school children, it comes to 336 million. So that is the VAT over and above the 2.1 billion shillings. All right, this is a huge figure. So I want to just isolate this 16% VAT of this total figure for a moment. Now, what did we say? 200 shillings is what is allocated per student for textbooks. If you divide this amount, that 336 million, that's the 16% VAT, divide that by the 200 shillings per child. What does that give you? 1.6 million. That means that 336, that VAT that is charged on this figure is enough to buy books for another 1.68 million students in schools at the moment. And this 1.6 million aid, by the way, could be taken off the 2.4 million who are in high school. We haven't even computed that figure by itself. So even while the publishers are continuing to complain about this, they point out that there's a host of other issues or a host of other goods and services that are exempt from VAT. Right. So in the 2016 budget, park entry fees were exempt from VAT. Also granted VAT exemption in this year's budget, pesticides, medical equipment, apparatus, and fishing as well. But taxing of books still goes on. It remains silent on this issue, despite the number of pleas that were sent out by the then chair of the Kenya Publishers Association, David Waweru. He was the immediate former. He is also the CEO of Word Alive Publishers. And I just want to read you a quote from David Waweru. He says, "Publishers have argued that a zero VAT rate on books is the best way to support reading, education, and a thriving knowledge economy." He goes on to say, the poor will not only be glad to have cheaper ugali to feed their bodies, but also books to feed their minds. Now, they have been petitioning for that 16% VAT to be removed from books since it was introduced in the VAT Act of 2013. Silent on that in this year's budget, but they continue to be hopeful. So that is that number for the week. That is important because it has a bigger effect on the cost of books. And by the way, we've only looked at textbooks for schools, but some say this is one of the impediments towards reading for leisure, reading for knowledge, reading for pleasure, over and above the textbooks that are provided